Hello? Hello, hello, hello. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Turn down. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Keep going. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Stick them on the chairs for people to use.
Yeah. Right, one for you. You can leave it under the.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. And let me just check that you've got. Chris sent some slides. I think some slides for you. You got them? Yeah, you got them. Chris, we've got a clicker for slides.
Okay.
Which is good. They're in there.
Quite small.
Oh no, the screen's there. Yeah. Testing. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Bicester Festival of Sustainable Living. In the next minute or so, we will be kicking off with a session on what it means to be sustainable, why sustainable living is important. So please gather and come to, if you'd like to take a seat. We're having a 45-minute session herein. I'm going to get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much to everyone for today. We're going to kick off. We've got a very busy agenda today. The first session is on living, and then we'll be moving on to homes. And then we've got a session on food. So we have a number of things today. But to kick off today, we're talking about sustainable living. I am called Tom Beckett. I'm the founder of Better Century, an organisation there to help individuals and organisations be net positive for nature and climate. In that, I am an advisor to an international NGO promoting nature as a solution to climate change, helping them develop their messages and development approach. I'm a net positive consultant to farms, helping them improve their land for nature and their buildings for climate. I'm also the architect of the Net Positive Life app, something which we will be presenting today, and you'll be some of the first users to have a chance to have a look at the Net Positive Life app. And I also run a Net Positive Life community, and I've led the creation of this festival today. And I'm very pleased to have had all the support from the amazing community groups which have come together. I'm also chair of Bicester Green, a Green Party councillor for Bicester Town and Cherwell District, and not least, a father, a nature enthusiast and gardener. We're here to talk about sustainable living, why it will make a difference, why it can be impactful and why we should do it. I am here with panellists Chris Goodall and Steph van der Pet. Chris Goodall is an internationally renowned author. I don't think he quite likes the internationally renowned, but there we go. His debut book, How to Live a Low Carbon Life, won the Clarion Award for non-fiction. His second book, 10 Technologies to Fix Energy and Climate, was one of the Financial Times Books of the Year. His most recent book, What We Need to Do Now for a Net Carbon Future, was shortlisted for the 2020 Wainwright Prize for Writing on Global Conservation, an FT Book of the Year. Chris will talk about how lifestyles matter. I'm also here with Steph. Steph is a chartered environmentalist with over 15 years of experience across a variety of industries, including not-for-profits, engineering and design consultancy, construction, and most recently biotech. She's also the founder and owner of So Sustainable, a community-focused zero-waste shop in Watlington, Oxfordshire. Steph is passionate about helping people to live and work more sustainably. I will kick off the panel. So I'm going to start with a bit of a personal story. Before I did all of this, I worked in several NGOs, and before that, I ran a fundraising consultancy. I have a degree in zoology and environmental science. I have always hated injustice. And unfortunately, the climate and nature crisis is one of the biggest injustices I can imagine. For the longest time I can remember, I have felt despair about nature and climate crisis. I have been angry, upset, occasionally depressed, and have lost my belief in humanity. However, recently, I have taken a turn. I have taken a stubbornly optimistic attitude about our capacity to tackle this crisis into my heart. What does this mean? It means I believe in human ingenuity, and nature will tackle this crisis. I have lost my belief that we are deleterious to our planet, that actually human beings are fundamental to improving it. I now believe that we are the solution. I believe this is a much better way of living than continuing to despair. Like everyone else is doing, I now find pockets of society which is taking positive action and celebrate and support them. I think that's the only way we can tackle this problem, and we are all that we all support these initiatives. And what will be the result? Well, we are the end users of everything. And people forget that. We receive all goods and services from companies, and actually our decisions probably influence around 60 to 75% of all global emissions on climate and from nature, with the government taking grasp of the remainder. Our capacity to influence others is incredible, And what we can do as humans when we put our mind to it is extraordinary. Today we celebrate the decisions people are taking so other people can learn. We need to listen to stories of other people's actions as they can lead us to a happier way of life, where we engage in the solutions and we actually find happiness, and because we are part of the solution. And in part of that, our despair then diminishes. So today is about enabling a happier, more productive life and community. That is why we've also created the Net Positive Life app, because everyone can make a plan to align their lives with global goals and nature and climate. It counters the idea that people are giving something up when they make choices to live sustainably. We end up gaining something, a net positive life for nature and climate. We learn that our decisions aren't costly. Actually, they end up saving us money. Eating seasonally, cycling and walking, of course they save us money. We end up losing less resources. But we have been witness to one of the most violent discussions on reducing our impact on nature and climate. Fingers are being pointed around in a circle. Society points the finger at government. Government points the finger at companies and technology. And then it comes full circle back to society, who feel set upon with the demands for immediate changes. And whilst this is all happening, the discussions about the solutions are polarizing people. And this is because we've got people who want to see change, and then there are those who don't see the reason why we should change, as they're not sure it will make a difference. The fact of the matter is, we don't know which of the environmental tipping points will occur first. There are 6 we are dangerously close to crossing. Those are groundwater depletion, melting mountain glaciers, unbearable heat, space debris, believe it or not, uninsurable future. And those are severe points. And therefore we can't be sure about how our collective action will make a difference. We don't know how our lives can provide a solution to the problem. But we're also not going to be able to be part of the solution unless we take action in our own lives. How can we have faith in others and the whole of humanity unless we ourselves are taking action? This is about someone else. This isn't about someone else taking it. It is about everyone taking action. That is the only way we can achieve the human ingenuity and system change needed to tackle this crisis. And we need to celebrate it. Stand in the face of polarization of these issues and say we did something and we influenced someone. And that doesn't mean that today we need to take action. We simply need to plan it. So be here to learn about what you can do in an environment of celebration, where we all can make our plans, where we can all be net positive by aligning our lives with global goals for nature and climate. And then we can influence our friends and families, our workplaces, and our governments. Because until we make our own plans, we will only feel despair. And through making our plans, we will experience optimism. So I invite you today to be optimistic through learning and celebrating. And now I'll welcome Chris for his comments.
Good morning. Are these slides available? Right, thank you very much indeed. I apologise for using slides. I've got some numbers in here which I thought might be helpful in stimulating a discussion. Right, but first of all, the other apology I have to make is that I'm an author, so every time I give a talk like this, I have to make sure that my books have some publicity on the slides, and I apologize. This is a book that will come out early next year about the major remaining problems in the energy transition. Broadly speaking, we have it solved. Solar and wind around the world, plus a bit of geothermal and a few other things, are going to give us all the energy we need around the world, everywhere, including less developed countries, to make the lifestyles that we should be taking. But there are lots of other things that we need to change at the same time. For example, the cement industry, the steel industry. And this book is about those problems. But today, to stimulate the discussion, I hope, and please interrupt at any time, I've put some slides together about people's attitudes to changes that might be necessary for a zero-carbon lifestyle. Now, I don't know whether you can see this. I'll go to the front and try and explain what I'm trying to say on here. If you... Yeah. Oh, right. This is the result of a public opinion survey which looked at people's attitudes towards having a solar farm right in your local area, very close to where you are. Now, there's a view amongst certain sections of the UK media that solar farms are unpopular, but if you ask this question, you get the response that 51% of people are actively supportive of solar farms right close to them, 27% don't care, 8%, just 8%, oppose the existence of a new solar farm, and 11% don't know, or it wouldn't be relevant to them, probably because they live in a large city. So that's one of the illustrations, and you can find many, many like this, that there is broad support, at least at the superficial level, for the actions that the world needs to take to move towards decarbonisation, full decarbonisation. This is a similar survey. This is the support for low traffic neighbourhoods in London. This is not Oxford, this is just in London. I think the figures are similar for Oxford, but I couldn't find them immediately in a survey. 58% of people support LTNs, and 17%, roughly a third of that, or a quarter of it, say that they're a bad idea. That's suggesting that there's fundamental underlying support for this. The question that I'm going to pose over the next 2 or 3 minutes is, how deep is that support, and what might we do as society to strengthen the commitment to a sustainable lifestyle? This has not come up correctly. I'm sorry, this has just been distorted by the process of putting it on a projector like this. But what I've tried to show on here is a series of questions that were asked in sequence about, in this case, a phasing out of gas and oil boilers in the UK. The world has to move to electricity for heating homes. There really isn't any alternative if we're to get to zero carbon in the near future. Heat pumps are, for the majority of people, going to be the way forward, but they're expensive at the moment in the UK. There are poor installation standards, and it's not entirely popular. But if you ask people, do they support the phasing out of oil and gas boilers, the answer is unambiguously yes. 62% yes, say yes, and only 17% no. But if you ask them in more detail, if you probe with a second and third question, you find that support beginning to evaporate. If you make sure that if people get to understand what the lifestyle changes might be as a result of this, running their boiler differently, more expensive electricity and so on and so forth, support falls. And if you give them full information about the financial impact, in this case, we find that the support on average disappears. We've got more people now opposing the phasing out of gas and oil boilers than we have supporting it. But decarbonisation in the UK is utterly reliant on this process, so we've got to find a way of pushing it forward. The same is true of taxing meat and dairy products. Meat and dairy are responsible for roughly 20% of the UK emissions, mostly as a result of the cultivation of sheep and cattle. There is, once again, immediate support if you ask the question simply, do you support a higher tax on meat and dairy products to help phase out the consumption of these foods? But that disappears as you ask people in more detail about the consequences of that. So those are just two illustrations of that. So last slide here. So what might we do to help solidify the support for these vital measures and other measures like them to make decarbonisation possible, a sustainable living possible in the UK? And I put down here 4 things that might have some appeal, might work. Rather than taxing meat and dairy, the first point, perhaps we should consider subsidising good, nutritious foods that don't require large emissions of carbon dioxide in order to make them. We could allow some use of the things which are causing environmental problems at the moment. One idea, and I think it has widespread appeal, is to tax frequent flyers. So the first couple of flights you take a year, perhaps going on a holiday to Spain or something like that, don't cost you anything else. But if you use the airplane a lot, like some of our political leaders, we might find a way of taxing that in order to discourage large-scale and unnecessary flying. For heat pumps, what seems to work well around the country is using community leaders who are respected in their local area to install heat pumps and to show people, take them round, showing how effective they can be, properly installed and properly run. And last point, make a payment to those affected. In Denmark, where one of my daughters works on the development of solar farms, there's a payment each year for everybody who can actually see a solar farm, wind turbine. And that has tremendously affected the support for those things in Denmark, and this is also true in other parts of the world, such as the Netherlands. So we might try the same thing here. There's no doubt, and I use this as an example here, that the Blenheim solar farm is going to have a massive impact on a certain number of people. It's going to be the single most, if it's ever built, it would be the single largest solar farm in Europe by some way, so this is a very significant project. And make a real difference to the UK's decarbonisation plan, but nevertheless, for several thousand people, it has a very significant impact. We need to find a way of making sure that those people feel compensated for what goes on. Now, all of these things in some way or another are to do with money, and of course, we don't all believe that money is what drives behaviour, drives our attitudes. But the fact is, it can be helpful in smoothing over what for some people is going to be a very painful transition. Thank you.
Now, thank you very much, Chris. I'll now pass over to Steph.
Thank you, guys. Hi. I'm Steph Vanderpet. As Tom introduced, I own So Sustainable, a zero-waste refill shop down in Watlington, and I also work for an Oxfordshire biotech as their environment and sustainability lead. I'm going to take more of a personal approach to my talk today, talk a bit about my background, how I got into this, and my personal motivations for being in this space. So I undertook a degree at Swansea University in geography, and I vividly remember climate change being a huge part of that, and my secondary schooling before that. We've known about these climate issues for decades. There's reports from Exxon scientists in the 70s, possibly even earlier, showing the trajectory of global temperature change based on fossil fuel emissions, and they were bang on. You know, we're hitting every point they said that we would hit. They predicted it perfectly. So we really know what the issues are and what the solutions are, and we need to mobilize people, organizations, companies, governments to just make those necessary actions. And that's very much how I ended up starting my shop. I've worked for 10, 15 years in companies on environmental management and sustainability. And I became somewhat disillusioned with that slightly when I had my children in 2016. Not a good year to start a family, to be honest, with all that was going on politically. And that made me radically change my approach. I sort of withdrew from quite a lot of stuff at that time. I did seek mental health support and realized that what I really needed to do was focus on making tangible changes to my own personal life and my community that I felt were making a difference, because with everything going on, it can be really overwhelming and very complex and hard to know where to focus your attention. So for me, I found a huge amount of comfort and purpose in joining the parish council, helping set up a local children's centre when the county council pulled their funding for them, helping to connect people on these issues, and that kind of, in a roundabout way, ended up to me starting my shop. I intended it to be a community buying group to start off with, and then I had 100 people join my WhatsApp group overnight, and it quickly became clear to me I wasn't going to be able to manage this on WhatsApp, and it grew, and we did a crowdfunder, and then COVID happened, and my customer base went through the roof. I was taking as much through my dining room window as I do now in a high street shop. It was incredible. And footfall has fallen about 40% over the last 2 years, and I think that is just a very tangible display of how people's lives have kind of gone back to normal after COVID. COVID was obviously a very hard time for a lot of people, but in terms of climate action and sustainable lifestyle choices, I think it was actually a really positive thing. It showed us what can be achieved, you know, those blue skies, none of those flight vapor trails. It was just incredible to see you can turn the tap off overnight. These changes can be done. And for me, we need to help support people to play their part in it in whatever way that is meaningful to them. So what I try and focus on in the shop is, I never intended to be a retailer, right? That wasn't my purpose. The purpose of setting up the shop was to offer this service to local people, yes, but to create those connections with people, to have these conversations about, you know, what can you do in your life? What company are you part of? There's lots of CEOs and very important people that live around Watlington and do come into my shop. We have Russell Brand for one and Jeremy Irons for another, and we can have these conversations with these people while they're buying their, you know, weekly groceries. And the hope is that they then go away and sort of pay forward those changes into whatever organizations or systems that they're a part of. So that would be sort of my advice to everyone here, is look to those organizations that are sort of greater than the sum of their parts. What are you part of? How can you influence things? Can you just ask the questions, you know, do you have a transition plan? What's our carbon footprint? Where is our carbon predominantly coming from? A lot of companies are just focusing on their scope 1 and 2 emissions, which are, you know, their direct energy, electricity, gas costs and things like that, because they're much, much easier to measure. But where the real impacts are the scope 3, and that applies to, you know, all of our lives as well, the services we buy, the products we buy, and making sustainable choices within your means there. I think I speak from a very privileged position, 2-income household. You know, I don't have to make a lot of difficult choices given the current cost of living crisis. And I suspect quite a lot of us in the room today are in a similar privileged position. We can use our personal resources to vote for the kind of world we want to live in. You know, support your local shops, support greener methods of transport, try and take the train instead of the plane, even though it might take a bit longer and all of this. Enjoy the journey. And try to simplify our lives. I think things have become so complicated over the last few decades. The internet and social media and all of that is great, but in this hyper-connected world, we've become so disconnected from the places that we live. And I think that focusing on that and getting back to your local areas, and that's what I've done with my shop, you know, set that up, create those connections with people, and really find that sense of belonging from helping the people around you, and that hopefully will ripple effect out. And as I say, leverage those organizations that you're part of to make that change. And if I can just finish on a quote that we have above the shop door, it's, we don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly, we need millions doing it imperfectly. And I think you can take zero waste out of that and apply it to anything. You know, just do the best that you can, and try and spread that to others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now we are opening up to questions because we'd love to get your questions to open up this debate a little bit more widely. Could Caroline or Amanda come and take a microphone for taking any questions? So if you could hold your hands up, we'll take a microphone around. That would be great. And have we got any questions? Comments? Yes, sir.
Okay, is it going? Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Dave Beasley of Oxford Office Furniture, and I've been very privileged to be in office furniture for 40 years, and I'm very much about sustainability, repurposing, and I have been throughout that journey. And I just want to share with you some things which are sort of happening at the moment within the office furniture industry. You'd probably be quite surprised that in London, central London alone, there are 150 tons a month of furniture which is coming out of offices. This is because of the post-COVID situation. So if you can visualize 150 tons of office furniture, where does it go? There are few of us around the country that are really committed to sustainability. And we do all we can to repurpose that office furniture. And also we give an awful lot to charity as well, because we would rather see it being repurposed than go into landfill. We do not do landfill. We cannot cope with anybody with the thought that they're going to chuck an office chair into landfill. So I also want to share with you the fact that a lot of this furniture, even if you paid the same price for this furniture, you're probably buying a far superior product than what is available today. And that is because everything comes cheaper, it's made cheaper, it's cheaper products. The good news which has come out of all this is that one or two of the well-known English manufacturers, under pressure from people like us, are now making furniture that can be repurposed and remade going forward. So when you go to buy something, whether it's office furniture or a bicycle or something like that, you're doing your bit if you actually go and choose something which somebody else no longer has a use for. And you save money, and you probably end up with a much better product. That's point number one I want to make. Point number two is we were the very first company in the UK to go vehicle to grid. Many of you may not understand what that means. It means that with our electric vehicles, when they get back in the afternoon, they get plugged in, and any excess electricity goes back into the grid. So when the vehicles come back, 3:30, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, it's at peak time when everybody is using electricity. So we were on a government-funded scheme to do this. The trial is now finished, but the messages that I learned from it were just profound. So I'm now happy to share with you the new story of going vehicle to home. So most of us in here, I'm sure, have got vehicles. Hands up those with electric vehicles in this room. Okay, so what would you say, 25%? 25%? Let's hope it's 100% within the next 12 months, because without doubt, it's very much the way to go. So rather than putting electricity back into the grid, we are going to put electricity back into our home. So what happens is we will be taking electricity at the cheap rate overnight. We'll be storing it in an electric car, and we will then be using that electricity when everybody else wants electricity from the grid to run our house during the day. To me, it's a no-brainer going forward, because not only homes where they can have a spare car, and I'll come to the cost of the spare car later.
I might have to just slow you down, because I'd love to get other people's input.
sorry, but I'm chairing this. And
if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards,
Yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah.
very welcome to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to pick up Chris's point about the support falling away when people consider the practical implications of carbon reducing measures. I live in a small village where almost every house is heated by oil. So I was really keen to get an air source heat pump. And we did that 3 years ago. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. People think it takes tremendous upheaval, or you've got to have all your radiators replaced. I just wanted to say that it was quick, it was easy, it's effective. We don't need to give it a single thought now. The heating comes on when we need it. And my only regret was that we didn't do it sooner. There was then a substantial grant to have this done, and I think you're absolutely right, Chris, that there need to be financial incentives for people to do this, but in terms of the practicalities, it actually is really easy.
Should we take a few? Let's take a few questions. Go on, and comments.
Hello, I believe everything is political. So which political party would you support in your endeavours?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah. Back there.
Hi, I've got a comment more than a question. I am a local architect and we specialise in sustainability, listed buildings and such like. And I would say over the last couple of years, people have become a bit more focused on what they can do to their homes. They are a bit more aware of it, but there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what's, the air source heat pump, for instance. There's a lot of heating contractors that don't actually understand how it properly works. So they are giving false information. Which is quite damaging, because then people suddenly say, well, I won't go with an air source heat pump because it won't work. And that's when we come in and we have to try and pick away their opinions that they've been forced upon them. So I would say that although attitudes are changing, people are still not well enough informed.
Brilliant, thank you. Any others?
Hello. We are shortly going to be moving from this delightful county to the far end of Essex. And at the far end of Essex, there is a plan to bring a huge power line from offshore solar farm or whatever it may be into a power station on the Thames, which will cross the very area of Essex where we are planning to live. This touches on what Chris was saying just now about paying people to actually accept solar farms on their doorstep. This has been offered by the Power Authority to the residents of East Essex, and many of them are just rejecting the idea because they say it's not about us, it's about where we live, it's about our environment, it is about actually protecting the countryside, which is not just our countryside, it's everybody's countryside. So unless you're prepared to subsidise everybody, wherever they may live, then it's a no-go. So I'd like to just suggest that people near to that solar farm that you mentioned should take a similar view.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, I think we'll take this back over to the panel. I have 3 points. I'm going to take this back over to the panel. Sorry, Drone. So we have 3 points, which is about air source heat pumps, political party, I suppose big renewable energy systems, and I suppose kind of misinformation. So I'll pass over to Steph to say her first points on this.
Thank you. So to pick up on the air source heat pump and the architect comment there. One of the most, and something Chris said earlier actually about community leaders getting air source heat pumps or demonstrating technology. There's two examples of this I can think of from my past. One is Dave here, who gave us this very interesting insight into Oxford office furniture. The first electric car I drove was actually an electric Mini that Dave had as part of a government trial, I believe, 15 years ago, maybe. Yeah. And I now have 2 electric cars in my house, and I credit you with setting me on that track, Dave. So, and with an air source heat pump, another local author that you may have heard of, Mark Linus, was involved in what was called a Wander Around Wolvercote, again around a similar time, and a community group in Wolvercote organised a trail of community sustainability initiatives, which included a look at Mark's house, who had recently had air source heat pumps installed. And those kind of things are really key to showing people, look, I've done it, I love it. There's not these problems with it. So if you can, organise that sort of thing in your community, I'd say definitely go ahead. As for political parties, what to say? I mean, I have no idea who I would vote for. At the moment, it's a bit of a mess. I once did a course at the Low Impact Living Initiative, which I think is at Winslow, on how to build your own micro-scale wind turbine. And I think I was about 20 at the time. Everyone else there was a middle-aged man. It was a fantastic experience. And I remember talking to them about the state of politics at the time, and I was horrified that they were all like, I don't vote. I can't believe you don't vote. What do you mean you don't vote? At the time, I was like, I think we should be like Australia. You should get fined if you don't vote. If you don't vote, you can't complain. You can't have an opinion. But I can see how a decade or so later, you can get to this point where it's such a state. It really is. I couldn't pin my colours to a mast right now, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Steph. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to respond to the questions which we've already had. I'm really sorry, but we've got limited time. So, Chris.
On the heat pump, is that on? Yeah. There's a village just outside Cambridge which put a community heat pump in, and this may be possible for many villages around here. It'll be more efficient. It needs a new heat network of hot water around the village, but in many places, for example, Oxfordshire villages, this would be perfectly possible. But can I also just say, please, there is a scheme coming up, I can't remember the date, when people with heat pumps are asked to open their doors to anybody who wants to come and have a look. Perhaps you might, if you might join into that. Political parties. I'm a member of the Green Party. I stood as the Green Party's candidate for Oxford West and Abingdon 13 years ago. Where I live now, it's a safe Lib Dem seat. I don't even know whether the Greens will stand in Oxford West and Abingdon, whatever it's called after the changes. But I want to vote for a party that is entirely committed to wholesale changes in the way that people run their lives. And I'm afraid to say, at the moment, I only see the Green Party with that degree of commitment. There's lots of things about the Green Party I disagree with, but the fact is that on the fundamental issues, the Green Party represents, I think, the people in this room, if I may say so, you've come out to this event today, much better than any other political party in the UK. The gentleman at the back talking about large wind farm offshore coming into the Essex, into the Thames estuary. Look, the problem is, if we want cheap, low-carbon electricity, we need big schemes, whether they be solar farms like the Blenheim solar farm, or the offshore wind in the North Sea, or indeed offshore wind around the coast of the UK, onshore wind around the coast of the UK. There are some consequences to this. Even if we decarbonise all the electricity we ever are likely to need, which is a lot more than we need at the moment, we're only going to use a very small fraction, perhaps 2 or 3% of the UK's land area. I'm afraid to say we have to find a way of making that possible. I know it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants pylons at the end of their garden. But I do say that without it, full decarbonisation is going to be very tricky indeed.
I will comment on a few other points. I think the point about the use of land, there are, I mean, Mike Berners-Lee, who does a lot of work in this area, like the UK needs 1.5% of all of its land area to have solar panels on it for it to supply all of our energy needs. And currently about 7% of the UK is built on. So it doesn't, well, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Is that there's plenty of space to be putting renewable energy up. But then I think this is also a fundamental trade-off, right? If you don't want climate change to happen, you don't want our land to become a mist of dust and become a dust bowl in various different areas, and you don't want us to have water shortages, then, you know, renewable energy and having some offshore wind is a perfectly reasonable trade-off, right? I mean, and if you want to leave a perfectly, you know, wonderful world for the children of the next generation, that is really the reality of the trade-off, right? And because this stuff's it's gonna happen in between 2050 and 2100, right? We're already seeing it happen. So I don't like to finish on that point, but in terms of politics, I'm Green Party, but I think the fundamentals about this, and I always think about a Venn diagram in terms of society, economy, and environment. And I think the Green Party view it that the environment is around society, and that the economy feeds society, and society looks after the environment. Now, I think many of the other parties will view it that economy is as important as the environment, as important as society, or some parties might see it in other ways. But I think thinking about it in that way is fundamental to the transition which we need to see. And I hope all political parties move into that paradigm. But it's about the speed of how we move into that paradigm, the route between A and B. And I think that's the fundamental interesting point from my perspective. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but there's going to be another panel session on homes at 11 o'clock, so we can get a deep dive into homes at 11 o'clock. And there can be loads more questions there on homes, and you can hold some of your points for them. I have a slightly self-indulgent exercise now, which is that I'd like to show you, because we kind of set up this festival, and we're actually going to allow any of the stall holders which have come today to speak after particular sessions. I have the luxury to talk a little bit about the Net Positive Life app, and I'd like to show you a few of its features. It won't take very long, but please indulge me. So this is the Net Positive Life app, and when you come onto it and you sign up, you get all the different areas of change which you can make, and you get your carbon footprint, which is kind of broken down by area, and you all get an inherited carbon footprint of a UK citizen, and you can look at your carbon footprint, where the impact is on nature and climate, and see where the impacts are coming from. And you can figure out, okay, well, that's interesting. Well, what do I do to fix that? And you can go back to your dashboard and pick something which you want to do. I was a bit slow this morning on doing that. And you can pick something like homes or food. Let's choose food. So I can see what my carbon footprint is of food, but maybe I want to choose to, I've got a carbon footprint there. How do I reduce it? What do I need to do? Okay, well, let's have a look at grow your own food. That's fine. And then I get a little bit of information on how to grow my own food, and I get a choice here. You can't see the drop downs, but you get a choice of when you might want to plan to grow your own food. And then you can add it to your Net Positive Life app, and you get to see what the cost of actions of being taken, the carbon saved per year, the cost savings for action, the space given back to nature. And the interesting one is the financial benefit to a future world economy, which, of course, if you reduce your carbon impact, we're not actually taking away from a future world economy. And we can have a look at what that actually means in terms of your carbon footprint. Well, there's still a bit more work to do on food. I still need a lot more to get myself to a net positive life, which is aligned with nature and climate. So maybe I'll reduce animal-based products, but maybe I'm a bit of a meat eater. I can't really see myself doing that quite soon. So maybe I'll choose to do that next year or the year afterwards. So I'm going to choose to do that in next year, and maybe have 1 in 5 of my meals next year as meat and dairy free. And then maybe I'll go a little bit further the year afterwards. And again, I can add that to my Net Positive Life app, and I can have a look at the impact that's brought to me, the impact of nature, the financial benefit to a future world economy. And then I can kind of look at my my food impact and see if it's taken me anywhere closer towards net positive. Oh, well, those decisions have really helped me. That's brilliant. I mean, I'm getting closer to reducing my impact, but how does it view on my global impact? Well, let's have a look at that. Well, I've still got work to go. I've got to get to the green line. So there's a bit of work for me to do in various different areas. In terms of nature, I've done pretty well. I've managed to cut my impact on nature in half. Let's have a look at money. Money might be an interesting one. I'm not going to do too many of these examples, but positively. What does banking positively mean? How do I learn a little bit more about that? Well, in the Net Positive Life app, you get some links to some critical information about making those decisions. You even get some videos about how you can go about making those decisions, a guide to banking, or links off to various different sources. And then you can see at the bottom, okay, well, I saved 530 kilograms of carbon from choosing that. I get financial future benefits future world economy £3,000. Brilliant. Okay, I'll add that. Well, I'm doing quite well now. I've done a number of different things. I've got an estimated impact of all of the actions which I've taken. That's brilliant. Now let's have a look at how it is for the overall dashboard. Well, you know, actually it's taken a dent. It's done a little bit more of a dent in my carbon impact. My impact on nature is looking pretty good, but I still need to take some more actions. The really interesting bit is that it also costs the actions which you can take. So it'll cost the kind of impact from homes and the choices there. You can have a look at the cost from food. The really interesting thing is you basically get your life plan costed. Still has a few glitches there, but we're fixing it. But this kind of allows you to see how much you might be saving. Mostly we've added food. If you're going to add a car, then that would probably be loads more expensive. 10 grand to buy an electric car, more than the others. But that is a little bit of a sneak preview on the back end of the Net Positive Life app. There is, for everyone, somebody at the back who will be able to show you how to use the Net Positive Life app. If you want to look at the back end, you can. We're also, for this festival, we're giving everybody three months free access to the Net Positive Life app. And then it's £20 a year. It's not much, but it allows for you to go about planning your trajectory to net positive. But you can go and have a look at it for free whilst you're here. You can sign up using the QR codes. The other thing is, if you can't be bothered to use a digital device, which I expect many people will feel like that, we've also got at the back pledge cards. What we'd really, really like is for people to say what they've currently done or what they're planning to do in the next year and put that onto the pledge cards, because we would like it that at the end of this festival we had like a whole series of pledges and a whole series of things which we'd managed to achieve as a collective, which we can celebrate. So please do add to those things. The Net Positive Life app will be, if you use the QR codes and take that route, that will also be helping us record everything from this particular activity. So thank you for your indulgence of me and that. Could we all have a round of applause for the panel today? Thank you very much. Thanks very much. We'll be back at 11 o'clock. Please do get a drink or whatever you like. Sorry? It's 4 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I call everyone to order, please? We're about to start the next session. Thank you very much. If you could take your seats, I'd be very grateful. Our next talk is about homes and how one can be more sustainable in the home. If you'd like to take your seats, ladies and gentlemen, I'd be very grateful, and then we'll start the next talk. Thank you.
Herding cats, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, everyone, I think we're going to start. If you want to come and take your seats. Okay then, welcome everyone. Thank you. I think that we can all agree that was a wonderful session that we've just heard, and now we're going to do a slightly deeper dive into homes in particular. So I'm sure there'll be some great questions at the end. We'll make sure to leave some time for that. But before then, we have some great speakers. So let me just start with some introductions. My name's Claire Williams. I'm the chair for this session. I'm a senior program manager for an international environmental charity. So I have a very sort of keen interest in all of this stuff, but I'm by no means an expert in homes. That's certainly up to the panel to do that there. But we'll be starting off with an overview of sort of energy efficiency and the funding streams available from Dale here. And then we have John, who's an independent councillor. He'll be talking about his own retrofitting experiences. We also have Simon and then Chris, who will also talk about their retrofitting experiences as well. So some great opportunity to pick people's brains and ask lots of questions about how they did their own work on their own houses. So let's start with Dale. So Dale Hoyland is the Oxfordshire Retrofit Team Leader from Oxfordshire County Council, part of the Climate Action Service. He helps to tackle fuel poverty and deliver measurable carbon savings through those projects. He has a BSc and MSc in environmental studies from the University of York. He's a practitioner member, of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and holds the City and Guilds.
Track from all the other things. I'm also have been for many years chair of the National Vegetarian Society, now deputy chair, and certainly cutting out meat, as was mentioned earlier, also makes a big difference. But in my talk, I'm going to really concentrate now on, as I say, simple actions that we can all take and how that would be funded. The second thing is that the cost of living crisis, clearly. The cost of energy has increased, which is very good for those of us looking to take action like installing solar panels and heat pumps and all this sort of thing, moving us away from, or certainly reducing our reliance, shall we say, on the energy provider, because insulating our homes, keeping the heat in, and as I say, then turning towards on-site renewables like solar PV, all help to reduce those costs. There's some statistics on the slides there, which I won't go through, but just to say, actually, although we are facing a cost of living crisis, actually in the southeast England we are far better than most of the rest of the country. So we're actually doing quite well, but clearly lots more to be done.
Can I just check if everyone can hear Dale?
Shall I? I'll hold it a little bit clearer. Is that better? Yep.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's noisy. Sorry. So our mandate that we're wanting to get to by 2030 is to install heat pumps, on-site renewables to 16,000 properties to at least an EPC B standard, which is quite high, by 2030, and that's what we're aiming to do. So I think that equates to something like 54 installations per week. At the moment, we're doing about 15 to 20, so there's a long way to go. So just to start with, in terms of how we should go about looking at energy saving, the first area on the graph there is cutting out any wastage, unnecessary use, and using what we're left with as efficiently as possible, moving into the second area there, which is things like insulating, and everything is generally, hopefully, getting more energy efficient. I mean, even my laptop that I was provided for work, whereas my CDC one had an LCD screen, about 65 watts usage, this one's down to 40 watts or just below with an LED screen. Just things like that. So we're generally moving in the right direction, and of course must continue to do so. And then the third area there is having cut out the unnecessary use through behavioural change and things, as I say, using what we're left with as efficiently as possible through fabric improvements to the house and such like, we should then look seriously at on-site renewables, because actually, although the price of, for example, solar PV and battery storage hasn't necessarily dropped all that much, the efficiency certainly has gone up, and of course, because the cost of electricity has gone up, is now much more worthwhile doing that. So and I'll go on to some grants that may be available to help. So behind me is a typical sort of 3-bedroom, 7-detached home, completely uninsulated, and that's showing typical kind of heat loss. So you can see about a third from the walls, say this is a cavity wall property, a quarter through the roof, and then various percentages from other things. Very simplistic diagram, but let's look at now, if we fully insulate this property, here's the sort of changes that can be made. So again, huge difference to the walls, cutting out about 20% of that heat loss. From the roof, from 25%, so a quarter of all the heat loss from the property, down to about 8%. And interestingly, you know, windows, expensive, not a huge amount of difference if we're saying upgrading from single glaze to double glaze or double glaze to triple glaze. So, you know, you'd probably prioritize that less. But of course, there are other advantages in some of these things, particularly with windows, aesthetics, noise reduction from the road outside, whatever. But really, you'd concentrate on the walls and roof and get that right first. I've got a couple of really quick examples of thermal imaging. So these properties, you know, look absolutely identical from the outside. This is a semi-detached property here. On the right-hand side, they installed cavity wall insulation. On the left-hand side, new windows. But the amount of heat loss reduction, I should say, the sort of bluer colours are cold walls. That's what we want to see, because we're looking at this from the outside of the house. Both the inside of the house were heated to the same temperature, but you can see on the left-hand side a lot of heat loss from all of the wall area, and we're only looking at the front elevation here. It was the same on the gable and the rear of the property. So a really great investment from the house on the right-hand side to install cavity wall insulation, perhaps less so the left-hand side for windows. And just to now prove that you're all experts, having heard that 30 seconds on thermal imaging, what do you think is happening here on the left-hand side? Just shout out, don't need a microphone. Yep, absolutely, yeah, it's a radiator. Simple sort of reflective foil behind the radiator, being that it's on an external wall, would certainly have cut down a fair proportion of that heat loss. Not all of it, but it would have made a big difference. And here, example hasn't been properly installed under the window, for example. You can't expect when filling a cavity wall that it just flows nicely and fills all the gaps. You know, you need to have a good pattern of install. And that's one way that you'll tell whether property, a cavity wall property has been installed with insulation. Look under the window, because there should be drilling holes specifically there. So very quickly on the funding then. First of all, we have a scheme, a very special, innovative scheme, specifically in a small area of West Bicester. So if there's anyone here on the particular streets on the map that I'll bring up in a moment, go for it. This is for air source heat pumps primarily, but also solar, battery, and other measures, because we must make sure that your property is heat pump ready. So in other words, well insulated. And the whole purpose of this, and as I say, it's a very special project. Only 4 in the whole of the UK are funded to this stage. We're lucky enough to have 2 in Oxfordshire, the other one being Rose Hill. The whole purpose of this is to prove that we can install air source heat pumps at scale, at a scale needed to meet net zero for the country. And there's not very many areas that we can do this in because of the amount of capacity on the grid. So there's the map of the area. However, Laura is over there behind the banner, the green and orange banner. Go and speak to her if you're anywhere near or you know anybody in this area, because we need a lot more sign-ups. I'm going to skip over all the rest of the funding slides, but I want to sort of leave you with the general message that there is funding out there for lots of things, some of which is fully funded. So, for example, the Home Upgrade Grant Phase 2 will fund up to £38,000 worth of work per property if you meet the eligibility criteria. So maybe this is more for the surrounding villages because it's for people not using mains gas for the primary form of heating and under £39,000 household income. All the work will be fully funded. I've got a lot of clicking to go through here. Then there's Eco4. There's also the Great British Insulation Scheme, just launched, which is based on, as you can see, council tax banding A to D, which will fund various works for you. And just to leave you with the general message, if you want to find out more, if you're interested in energy efficiency improvements, if you're savvy on the internet, then go to oxfordshire.gov.uk/retrofit. Otherwise, Better Housing, Better Health has a free phone telephone number. Again, pick up a leaflet. Pick up a thermometer card actually from the table, because that has both the telephone number on and the website. And just to say, there's lots of other funding that we have in the pipeline. So hopefully, if they come about, that will fund more good projects for you and provide funding for retrofit across Oxfordshire. We must leave fossil fuels behind. That's the whole premise of this event, through homes, transport, food and businesses, so all the kind of areas covered here today. And community level support. Anything that you can individually do will add up to make a significant difference.
Thank you very much, Dale. We'll save questions till the end if that's all right. And so now we'll hear from John. Here you go, John. John Broad is a local independent councillor on Cherwell District Council and is the chairman for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that reviews action on climate change. John is enthusiastic in improving efficiency of properties through technology and has done amazing work on his own property in installing solar panels and battery charge. John's going to share his story of installing those measures so that others can understand what it takes. So over to you, John.
All right, thanks ever so much. I'll drop down here so I can see my own slides. One of the... that's the wrong ones. That's next man. Couple of things while this is going on. There is at the moment the Cherwell District Council consultation on the local plan going on. Do have a look at it. Do please make comments. Do check through it that what we're talking about today is incorporated. I've tried hard to do my part, but I'm only one councillor, so it is important to ensure that we do get that covered. Right. Saving energy. My house is down in Langford Village. It was built by Westbridge, so it was built down to a price, to the minimum they could possibly get away with, the maximum profit. They went bankrupt. But, well, that doesn't help me, I'm afraid. But, so looking at the house, I also grew up as an engineer. I worked for 38 years at Press Steel. So my background is really interested in anything to do with technology. So a lot of what I've done is actually done because I wanted to do it. So you have to bear that in mind a bit when it comes to costs. But I started off by saying I definitely was in favour of solar panels. It makes total sense that you can generate your own energy instead of paying somebody else to generate it for you. And of course, electricity is expensive. So I got 8 panels. Each panel was 250 watts in those days. I got in just in time to catch the feed-in tariff. So I've got the full feed-in tariff, which was great, but then it cost me a lot of money for the panels, because at that time they were really expensive. And I also live in a house that's round the wrong way. The roof points north-south, so you think this is no good at all. So I got the the PV installation on the front. As I say, the feed-in tariff was 43 pence in those days. And of course, the electricity company also pay you for the energy you're generating and feeding to them. Now, you end up paying today probably about 30 or 40 pence a unit to buy it. They give me threepence, which I find really annoying, but anyway. So that's what the house looks like, with the solar panels on the front of the house. So they work really well in the afternoon. And I thought, so the logic is obviously there, but of course, solar panels don't work at night, which is why I've got a bit of an argument about Chris's idea of covering the landscape with solar panels, because they don't work at night. But, and the energy is available whilst most people are at work. Well, that doesn't work either, does it? That's not very good. That's feeding energy to the grid, doing great for the country. So I spent all this money to help the country. But I didn't get anything much for it, because when I got home, it was dark. And of course, during the winter, you don't get so much sunshine. The daylight hours are shorter as well. So the whole thing's not working very well. And I use it for heating, cooking, TV, plus a car. And I've also got a motorbike, but that doesn't use electricity. So the obvious thing is to get a battery installation. So I did that, and as with a lot of people, I got slightly conned. The company came in, they fitted something called lead crystal industrial batteries in the roof. I'd never heard of lead crystal batteries, and they really didn't work very well. They were rubbish, and they only delivered 2 kilowatts as an output, which never either. And the company went bankrupt. So, I was really great in hiring companies that went bankrupt. And the batteries failed as well. So that didn't work either. So the obvious thing to do, and interesting, it was after going to meet Dale up at the, not Dale, Derek, wasn't they, up at the office thing. And I bumped into a guy there who could fit me a Tesla Powerwall to make sure I've got energy for my house when the power goes off. There is a snag. They didn't tell me that I got Gateway 1, which means that doesn't work. In other words, if the power goes off, my power goes off as well. Otherwise, I electrocute the guy who's trying to repair the power line. So that didn't work. That's what it looks like.